When my troublemaking friends and I were 13, one of our favorite weekend traditions was ding dong ditching. Every Saturday night, we'd roam the neighborhood looking for houses to prank. Back then, about 10 years ago, our suburban block had fewer houses and more empty lots and woods, which made for great hiding spots. For the sake of this story, I'll call my friends Mark, James, and Matt. Mark and James were usually the ones brave, or dumb, enough to actually ring the doorbells, while Matt and I played it safe and found cover right away. That night, we hit about 5 or 6 houses. Most of the men who answered just stepped out onto the porch, looked around, maybe shouted a bit, then went back inside. A couple of times, we rang the bell twice just to get a better reaction. One guy threatened to call the cops after the second ring. As soon as he shut the door, we bolted down the street and ducked into the next block. Unlike our street, this block still had patches of forest between the houses, and everything looked a bit more run down. The first house we picked was directly across from a wooded area, perfect for hiding. It looked neglected. Tall, uncut grass, a battered old car in the driveway covered by a tarp, and peeling paint on the siding. Mark was the one to go up. He rang the bell and sprinted across the street to hide with us in the woods. The door opened almost immediately. A large man, probably 6 feet tall and stocky, stepped out, already angry. Unlike the others, he didn't just look around. He stormed through his yard, yelling threats, checking behind bushes, clearly trying to find us. We couldn't help but laugh. It was the usual routine for us. Ring, hide, wait, repeat. Eventually, the man gave up and went back inside, still muttering under his breath. Mark, ever the daredevil, waited a few minutes, checked the windows for signs of movement, and then sprinted right back up the stoop for round two. Mark decided to ring the bell again, but I didn't envy him this time. That house gave off a different kind of vibe. Too still, too angry. I wouldn't have dared go near it again. But Mark, being Mark, didn't hesitate. He knew he had less time now, so instead of hiding across the street, he bolted to the side of the house and disappeared from view. The door swung open much faster than before. This time, the man came out holding a rifle. We all exchanged wide-eyed looks, our stomachs dropping as if we'd just been caught red-handed. We were done messing around. This wasn't funny anymore. The man walked through his yard again, but now he checked more spots. Behind his car, around trees, even peering into the edge of the woods. Then he stopped. He stood in the middle of his lawn, scanning the dark. His head slowly turned, then froze, facing directly at us. Me, Matt, and James instinctively ducked lower behind the brush, holding our breath. Had he seen us? 10 long seconds passed. Then, without a word, he turned and went back inside. But moments later, we saw him again, this time standing motionless at his front window, staring straight toward the woods where we hid. And just then, we spotted Mark creeping back toward the house. We were too terrified to warn him. All we could do was watch as he rang the bell for a third time, then sprinted off. The man didn't move right away. He stayed frozen in the window, watching. Then, slowly, he turned away and disappeared from view. We still hadn't seen Mark again, and none of us dared to move. Then we heard his voice shout from across the street, "Run! We didn't understand until we heard footsteps rushing up from behind us. Spinning around, we saw the man charging toward us through the woods, rifle in hand, aimed low. We didn't think. We ran like prey, bolting across the street toward Mark. He was waving us on, yelling. We didn't stop until we were blocks away. Only then did Mark explain what he saw. The man sneaking into the woods with his rifle, stalking us in silence. We never reported the man or anything that happened that night. We told a few friends, but that was it. Fortunately, the house was several blocks from ours, so we never had to walk past it again. We just buried it. Another messed up memory from our reckless teenage years. But strange houses weren't done with me yet. Years later, when I was in college, my parents rented me a small off-campus house. Nothing fancy, just a modest, one-story place in a quiet neighborhood. I was grateful. It gave me space and independence, and for the first few days, I really liked it. Then things started getting weird. It began on a rainy Saturday. I had nothing to do, so I settled into the living room and binge-watched TV for a few hours. At some point in the afternoon, I heard a strange scraping sound across the living room floor. I muted the TV and looked around, expecting maybe a mouse or raccoon had gotten in. But I saw nothing. Shrugging it off, I resumed my show. That was just the beginning. The rain continued into the evening, heavy and relentless, giving me a good excuse to stay in. Around 9 p.m., I heard something else, this time from the kitchen, a soft thump, like something falling. I stood up and grabbed the nearest thing for defense, which turned out to be a throw pillow, and crept toward the kitchen. There, in the middle of the floor, was a box of Cheerios, knocked over and spilling tiny O's across the tile. I hadn't touched that box in days. Confused, but not yet scared, I dropped the pillow and began scooping the cereal back into the box. That's when I heard the creak, an unmistakable sound of weight shifting on old wood. It came from near the kitchen table. I froze. When I looked up, no one was there. I told myself it was just the house settling or my mind playing tricks. Shaken, I cleaned up the mess and returned to the couch. The storm was peaking now. Thunder cracked overhead, but oddly, I found the sound relaxing, soothing even. That was the last thing I remembered before I dozed off for what felt like an hour. When I woke up, the TV was still on, but that wasn't what had woken me. I remembered waking up to what I thought was a bang or thud from downstairs. I wasn't totally sure. Still groggy, I turned off the TV and headed upstairs to bed, chalking it up to a falling branch or a noise from the storm. The next day was normal. So was the day after. I started to relax again until another gray, rainy day rolled in. That morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been out drinking all night, though I hadn't touched a drop. My head throbbed, my stomach churned, and I was dizzy just from sitting up. It was the worst I'd ever felt without actually being sick. The stormy, dim light outside only made the mood heavier. I barely moved from bed that day, keeping the bedroom TV on for background noise and setting a trash bin beside me in case I needed to throw up. Around midday, I muted the TV, thinking I'd heard something from above. It wasn't the first time I'd noticed strange sounds in the house, but this was clearer, soft shifting or shuffling sounds from the attic. The attic entrance was in my bedroom, and most of the attic space extended over it. I heard the noise again, 3 or 4 faint thuds, like someone stepping or dragging something across the floor up there. Despite feeling like death, I dragged myself out of bed, grabbed an old aluminum baseball bat, and pulled down the attic door. I climbed up, pulling the light cord as I reached the top. The dim bulb flickered on, revealing dusty boxes left behind by the last tenant, but no sign of any animal or person. Still, something felt wrong. I backed down quickly, heart pounding. That night, I was jolted awake again, not by thunder, but by another thud from above. I still felt weak, but anger pushed me to action. I yanked the attic door open, bat in hand, and stormed up the stairs, yelling in the most aggressive voice I could muster. But before I could pull the light cord, I heard it. Soft, playful giggling. A child's giggle echoing in the pitch black attic. The fear was instant and paralyzing. My insides dropped. I felt completely weightless, like my soul had slipped out of my body. I don't think the word fear is strong enough to describe what I felt in that moment. As soon as I heard that childlike giggle in the pitch black attic, I bolted. I don't even remember running down the stairs. I just remember being outside in the cold rain, clutching my phone with shaking hands. As I called my dad, I could barely get the words out, but I told him everything I could manage. My parents picked me up that night. They didn't brush it off or laugh. They could tell something had genuinely shaken me. In a strange way, I think they believed me. We went back to the house the next day and packed up my things. I never returned. After that, to this day, I'm convinced what happened in that house wasn't just in my head. It was something real, something paranormal. But that wasn't my only encounter with something I couldn't explain. When I was 20, I worked briefly as a maid for an elderly woman named Mel. She had a large, aging house that sat on 2 acres of land, surrounded by thick woods on 3 sides and a quiet road on the 4th. The house could have been beautiful if it were properly maintained, but instead it had a dark, eerie presence. The inside was mostly wooden. Floors, walls, even the ceiling panels. Natural light barely made its way into the rooms. Mel insisted on keeping the blinds shut almost all the time. Even when I opened them, without fail, they would be closed again the next time I passed by. In some rooms, she only used candles for light, making the house feel like it belonged to another century. The wooden floors creaked relentlessly, no matter where you walked. Mel was around 70 years old and spoke very little. My tasks were usually simple: sweeping, dusting, washing dishes, folding laundry, organizing mail. Physical things she struggled with. Then one Friday, she asked me to stay overnight. She had 4 bedrooms, and she lived alone, so space wasn't an issue. I arrived that afternoon with a backpack of clothes and toiletries. After putting my things down in one of the spare rooms, I turned around to find Mel standing silently in the doorway. She didn't greet me, just instructed me to clean the bedroom right away. After that, she asked me to straighten up the entire house, then disappeared upstairs. I didn't see her again for the rest of the day, but I heard her pacing slowly back and forth upstairs, especially near her bedroom. There were no TVs in the house, so I couldn't figure out what she was doing up there for hours. One thing Mel was strangely protective about was the basement. She told me directly that it was off limits. I wasn't to go down there under any circumstance. That night, I went to bed early, probably around 9 or 10, though I didn't have a smartphone to check the time. The bed was stiff and uncomfortable, and the silence in the house was almost oppressive. No buzzing electronics, no hum of traffic, just creaking wood and the occasional rustling from the trees outside. It took me forever to fall asleep. Hours seemed to pass. Then I started hearing footsteps outside my door, slow, deliberate steps on the old creaky floorboards. I assumed it was Mel going to the bathroom, so I tried to ignore it. But a few minutes later, I heard it again. This time, the footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I sat up, tense, and listened. I could hear the subtle shift of weight on the floorboards. Someone was standing just on the other side of the door, not moving, not knocking, just standing there. I didn't know what to do. I stayed frozen, barely breathing, listening to the soft creaking from the other side. Something wasn't right, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't sure it was Mel at all. She finally walked away. I heard her slow, creaking steps retreat down the stairs, and then the faint sound of a door opening and closing somewhere below. I had a strong feeling it was the basement door. Mel had been so protective of it. Something about the timing, the pacing, gave me chills. A while passed. Then I heard the door open and close again, followed by heavy, deliberate footsteps climbing the stairs. The weight of each step echoed in the otherwise silent house. The footsteps stopped right outside my door again. My heart was pounding as I sat up to listen. The floorboards groaned under the pressure of her weight. Then I heard the doorknob start to turn. I panicked, laid back down, and pulled the thin sheets over myself, pretending to be asleep. I heard the door open and Mel's slow steps enter the room. She stood there for a long moment. I didn't dare move or breathe too loudly. Then she turned and left, shutting the door behind her. That was enough for me. I waited about 30 minutes in silence, then finally got out of bed. I tiptoed to the door, down the stairs, and to the basement. I opened the heavy basement door, flipped on the light, and descended cautiously. The basement air was musty and damp, and I could hear the faint buzzing of a single overhead bulb. At the bottom of the stairs, I froze. Dead center in the basement were two old wooden chairs. Sitting in them were what I can only describe as decaying corpses, dressed and propped up like mannequins. Both wore old wigs, and one of them, a larger, slumped figure, had a beret placed on its head. A bug crawled across its collarbone, and I nearly vomited. I moved closer, needing to know if they were real. The smell hit me first. The corpses were shriveled, brownish gray, wearing remnants of clothing. They looked like they'd been down here a long time, maybe a year or more. I nearly screamed when I heard footsteps again, this time from the first floor. Someone was coming. I darted behind an old couch in the corner, crouching low, hands over my mouth, heart racing. The footsteps creaked down the stairs, slow, heavy, deliberate. I heard Mel reach the bottom. Then she whispered my name. Terrified, I peeked around the side of the couch and saw her already halfway across the basement, clutching a large kitchen knife. Her expression was blank, but determined. I knew she wouldn't be fast enough to catch me. I had a head start. I bolted up the stairs as she screamed my name behind me. I ran to the guest room to grab my backpack, slinging it over my shoulder with shaking hands. By the time I turned to go back downstairs, Mel was already at the top of the basement steps. Without a second thought, I ran out the front door into the night. Rain lashed against my face as I dashed to my car, fumbling for the keys. I jumped in, started the engine, and looked back toward the house. Mel was standing in the open doorway, silhouetted by the light inside, staring directly at me. Drove off that property as fast as I could, not stopping until I was back home. It took me a full 10 minutes to calm my breathing. Thankfully, I had never given Mel my address or phone number. She had no way to reach me. Looking back, I'm almost certain one of the corpses in that basement was her long dead husband. She had mentioned him once or twice, but the second, smaller, corpse, I have no idea. Maybe a relative, maybe not. All I know is something was horribly wrong with that woman and that house. It still haunts me.